Hello and welcome to Pitt Street Research. My name is Stuart Roberts and I'm one of the founders of our firm. And joining me all the way from Martinsried, near Munich in Germany, is Mr. Christian Pangratz, who's the CEO of Atriva Therapeutics. Christian, good morning on the morning of the Friday, the 13th of October, 2023.
Good morning, Stuart. Pleasure to be with you today.
So, Christian, you're CEO of Atriva Therapeutics. Atriva just announced recently that it was going to do a reverse takeover of BioCure on a Canadian listed company on the CSE. Talk to us about why you're doing that transaction. For a European biotech to list in Canada, it sounds a little unusual on first reading.
It sounds unusual, but it's actually a terrific opportunity for a European slash German biotech company to access the crossover investor market as well as the public investor market coming out of the private environment here. Now that we're advancing as a clinical development organization into later stage clinical development, the capital needs become larger. And therefore, we wanted to also broaden the universe of investors that we can approach. And the reverse takeover situation that we recently announced with BioCure Technologies provides us with a fantastic springboard into the crossover and also the public investor market to present the Atriva investment opportunity, which we believe to be a absolutely unique one, addressing a global healthcare issue that I'm more than happy to talk about a little bit more in detail in a moment.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. So Atriva Therapeutics started up in 2015 with an interesting proposition. Up till now, all of the drugs that were direct antivirals for influenza had been hitting things like neuraminidase or some other external target. Atriva's candidate believes that if you hit some of the cell signaling pathways that are impacted by influenza, you can not only knock the virus down, but not prompt it to mutate as well. So potentially this is quite a powerful antiviral drug in influenza that you are working on.
Yes, this is what we are developing is really a change in paradigm, in treatment paradigm for severe RNA virus infections. Typically, what companies have tried to accomplish is with direct-acting antivirals, attacking the virus as such and killing the virus, if you will. What we are doing is different. We are directing a molecule towards the host cells that the virus needs in order to replicate itself and spread the infection throughout the body. And in these host cells, there is a particular signaling pathway called the Ras-Raf-MEK-ERK pathway. And in that pathway, we are targeting a very specific component called MEK, M-E-K. And by downregulating MEK in host cells, we are capable of accomplishing two things at once. First, we are depriving the virus material that replicated in the host cell to exit the host cell and spread the infection throughout the body. And secondly, MEK at the same time is also responsible for the upregulation of highly inflammatory cytokines. These are molecules causing inflammation in different organs of the body, and in particular, the lung, leading, for example, to breathing problems in the case of severe RNA virus infections such as influenza or COVID-19. And therewith, we are really the first ones to tackle a problem that hasn't been able to be addressed by companies previously, as direct-acting antivirals are really, really good therapeutic options in the very early stages of the disease. But once patients are leaving the early stage of the disease and progress towards severe disease, there's absolutely no treatment available in the market today.
Right. And to your point, the inflammation is terrible. You're suffering for days, basically, from cytokines going all over the body and causing trouble. It turns out that your drug has immunomodulatory properties. You found that out in vivo. And in 2021, you were able to run a clinical study in COVID, another terrible RNA virus, where you got some pretty good data.
Correct, yes. In the phase 2 Respire study, the results, by the way, were just recently published in eClinical Medicine, which is part of the Lancet. We treated patients who were hospitalized with a severe SARS-CoV-2 infection. And in this patient population, we observed that zapnometinib demonstrated clear clinically relevant efficacy in terms of the primary endpoint of the study, which was the clinical severity status at day 15 after treatment. Furthermore, zapnometinib was also found to be just as safe as placebo, which is important because you don't want to have a drug that on the one hand works on the infection, but on the other hand causes side effects.
Right.
And interestingly enough, we also saw the more severely ill patients were, the better the drug actually worked, which has to do with the mechanism of action that I just described before. Because if the immune system is really strongly upregulated, then our drug works even better. And last but not least, treatment with zapnometinib, and that's really essential, led to an earlier hospital discharge on average by about 1 to 2 days earlier compared to placebo, which then translates also into material healthcare cost reductions for hospitals and healthcare systems.
Right. And it's interesting to me. This was a study that you were running in various countries in 2021. November 2021, the Omicron variant shows up. Suddenly it became difficult to continue recruiting. So you had powered the study to recruit in excess of 200 patients. You ended up with only 100 to evaluate. And yet on those numbers, the severely infected patients, the ones that are frankly at death's door, and I suspect there's a few lives that you saved as a result of this, you were getting a trend towards significance. Like we're talking P equals 0.1, not far off significance on very reduced patient numbers. So that's quite impressive.
Yes, we are quite encouraged by these results. As you pointed out, the therapeutic effect was found to be quite strong, even though not statistically significant, but from a clinical perspective, highly relevant. And that forms a fantastic foundation for us to move the drug forward into phase 2 development, also into severe influenza now. And
on that point, one of the things that COVID has taught us all is about pandemic preparedness. We all got caught short by COVID because it was a new virus, albeit an RNA virus, and we knew about RNA because we've been dealing with influenza since antiquity. Now policymakers want to be prepared. And if there's one pandemic that's going to jump out at some point, while you and I are both alive, it's going to be influenza. We've already seen at least two. There were three pandemics in the 20th century, and you came close to a pandemic when H1N1 swine flu jumped out of nowhere in 2009. So it's a reasonable bit. There's another pandemic coming in our future.
Of course. I mean, pandemics are a question of time. They will happen. The question that nobody can answer is when they are going to happen. Right. And when you look back over the last 100 years, Stuart, we saw a total of approximately 6 huge pandemics hitting human mankind across the world. Right. And 5 out of these 6 were caused by influenza, different influenza strains. 1 only was caused by SARS-CoV-2, by COVID-19. So that tells you the significance, the global healthcare significance of influenza. And that's also one of the motivating factors for us to work on influenza and in influenza. And we believe that with zapnometinib, which is an orally available small molecule that's formulated as a tablet, it's very simple to take. It will be taken once a day in the morning, so it doesn't get any simpler compared to alternative therapies if they were available, but compared to direct-acting antivirals, for example. And therewith, we should be able to help, in particular, severe RNA virus-infected patients to get over the infection much more quickly in case they are hospitalized, to get out of the hospital much sooner and save the healthcare system's tremendous cost, and ultimately also support economies, because we shouldn't forget, once people are sick with an RNA virus infection such as COVID-19 or be it influenza, they cannot work. And that also has a macroeconomic factor on economies around the world. And when you believe the annual statistics by the European Union and the US CDC, the Center for Disease Control, the direct and indirect cost caused by influenza annually, depending on the size of the season that we're dealing with, the severity of the strain that we're facing, Those costs are typically in the range in Europe and in the US in excess of 8 to 12 billion each for each country, for each region. So the economic costs are quite substantial.
Right. Now, it's interesting to me that you haven't actually studied your drug in influenza. You did have a pretty clean bill of health in phase 1, and this COVID-19 study has taught us a lot. But that's given you enough evidence to then get ready for a phase 2 study. What's your thinking about when that would play itself out in terms of what's the appropriate season to be launching in?
We have studied the drug in influenza preclinically, so we have an extensive database that we can look at that gives us enough confidence now also on the clinical side of the development plan that zapnometinib will hopefully be very effective in severe influenza. So in animal models, in vitro, in cell models, as well as in animal models, in vitro as in vivo, we have really strong results for different influenza strains. So that said, our phase 2 development plan is currently scheduled to roll out early next year, but ultimately it depends on how quickly we can complete the reverse merger transaction with BioCure and also secure additional capital for the company to have a sufficient financial foundation to work through the entire phase 2 development program, which will consist of two studies. One will be a human viral challenge study in which we will demonstrate the direct acting antiviral effect of zapnometinib, as well as the effect on the immune system by looking at biomarkers that are indicative of immunomodulation of our drug.
These are brave, generally young men who will act as human guinea pigs for this study in that particular example.
Correct, yes. So it's usually set up that healthy subjects, healthy volunteers, are getting infected with a very well-known influenza, attenuated influenza strain.
Right.
So they're getting mild to moderate influenza, and then they're treated in a very controlled hospital environment in order to demonstrate the drug. We wouldn't, obviously, you can't use any severe strains on these patients because that would pose a risk to their life. Cool. But these studies are absolutely standard for our area. They are used also for testing vaccines and other therapies in virus infections, and also bacterial infections. So this is a very safe setup for the patients. We're not putting any lives at risk here.
Right. So there'll be that initial study. Then what do we transition to after that challenge study?
Yeah, having the data from the human viral challenge study in hand, hopefully second half of next year, then we would ramp up for a phase 2B program. And that would be a study that we would conduct globally in 2 hemispheres, the northern and the southern hemisphere. If we are indeed all ready to go by late next year, we could start the clinical trial, the phase 2 trial, as early as October, November in the northern hemisphere, which is in particular Europe, and then transition over to the southern hemisphere, which is South Africa, India, Australia, for example, about a half a year later. So the total duration of the phase 2B program will be somewhere in the range of about 1.5 years.
Right. So it's a relatively near-term opportunity, but as you said, we've got to raise some capital. Now, you're hoping to raise about 15 million US from this reverse merger that you're doing, and that 15 million funds the scale up to start the viral challenge study. Is that enough to fund the next stage, the actual study that we're talking about in both hemispheres?
For the 15 million will be sufficient to fund the human viral challenge clinical trial. And we first obviously want to show to investors the therapeutic power of zapnometinib based on the human viral challenge study. Assuming that this trial will generate highly supportive data, then we would structure subsequent financing that will then be in support of the phase 2B development program.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And obviously, once the deal is concluded, then you're trading in Canada, and it's a fair bet that well, you and I were talking about this before we started filming. We get the sense that 2024 is going to be a better year than the last 2 years in terms of life sciences financing, particularly in North America. So that's part of the opportunity. Right. Position yourself in the world's most powerful capital market for biotech with some pretty interesting data from COVID-19, but coming into a challenge study, which is not hard to run. It's not hard to recruit the patients. It's not hard to get the trials. This has been done before. So now is a good time to be Christian Pangratz at Atriva Therapeutics, I would say.
I couldn't agree more. Yes, Atriva Therapeutics presents a really interesting and promising investment opportunity. Not only do we have a solid data foundation that gives enough confidence for the coming clinical work that we are planning to do over the next year to 2 years, but with that said, probably most importantly to note is that we are filling a gap here in which there is currently absolutely no treatment option available to patients. And that high medical need is a strong motivation for us, as much as it also poses a really attractive investment opportunity.
Right. Let's talk about you. You've been around the traps for a long time now. You were born in Germany, raised in Austria, and started your career in the pharma scene in Austria. Some time ago, you had a big opportunity to move to the US, and you ended up working for the venerable Nectar Therapeutics, particularly in their pegylation program. So you've gotten around a number of really successful biotech companies in your time. Nectar, and then later in Europe, a couple of companies in the respiratory space, Vectura and Sky Pharma. Talk to us about some of the highlights of your career and the things you've learned on the journey.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I hope I don't show too much, but I've been in the industry now for 27 years. I started my career as a product manager across various therapeutic areas with Bayer and with Pfizer here in Europe. In 2002, I decided to move to the US to really get more involved with the US pharma and biotech environment, as I really always enjoyed the business dynamics that I saw there from previous business trips to the US. And in 2004, I joined NASDAQ-listed Nectar Therapeutics in San Francisco, worked there for over 7 years in various functions, including marketing, business development, corporate development, and really got my hands deeply involved in transactions and other very complex and educational biotech situations. Might it be licensing transactions, M&A transactions, etc. And I came back to Europe. My wife and I decided to move back to Europe in 2011. I joined a German venture capital-backed respiratory startup by the name of antiviral. I joined them as their chief business officer, and we successfully exited the company in a 130 million euro transaction to Vectura in 2014. Afterwards, I joined LSE listed Sky Pharma as their executive vice president of BD, alliance management and project management, and helped the CEO and the CFO to restructure the product portfolio and ultimately position the company for a 440 million pound exit again to Vectura in 2016. And thereafter, I got involved in a really interesting joint venture in China, a joint venture that developed with BioCure Technology and local APIs, drugs for the Chinese respiratory market, which we then exited successfully in late 2017. And in early 2018, I was offered the opportunity to join Sterna Biologicals as their CEO. That's a antisense oligonucleotide-based therapy company for severe asthma. Raised 22 million in a Series A financing with them and initiated a phase 2 clinical development program. And by the time the company was sailing in safe and constant waters, I was approached by Atriva Therapeutics in late 2022 and asked if I wanted to succeed the longtime CEO, Rainer Lichtenberger, who is now in the process of retiring. And so due to this huge opportunity, in my opinion, around zapnometinib and host cell targeted therapy development in general at Atriva Therapeutics, I then decided to join the company in early 2023 in January. and have been enjoying the ride extremely here at Atriva ever since.
So, folks, there you have it. You've got a guy who's been around the traps more than once, it's fair to say. And you've been with some large companies, medium-sized companies, and small companies. So it's fair to say the investors at Atriva are going to benefit from years of experience on your part, where you've seen a heck of a lot of stuff that's worked and some things that haven't worked. So you've got a good idea about what to do.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I've seen the good and the bad, and I've been through a couple of heydays as well as doom days in the biotech arena so far. Yeah, and I can only repeat what Atriva has to offer is quite unique, and I share your view on the market developments, the macroeconomic developments, Stuart. We see the silver lining on the horizon for 2024. We are all hopeful that the markets are going to pick up, and that companies like Atriva Therapeutics are going to surf that wave and will be successfully funded and can advance really unique development programs through the funding going forward, and stimulate not only the industry as a whole, but also with the end goal always in mind, make a big difference in patients' lives.
Right, absolutely. Christian Pangratz, thank you for joining Pitt Street Research, and good luck on the $15 million transaction you're about to do.
Stuart, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.